What's going on, Lions fans? Welcome to the Pride of Detroit YouTube channel. I'm Miko, joined by my guy Morgan here. And Morgan, we're back with some more roster news from the Detroit Lions. We talked about the final 52-ish roster that the Lions had put together at the deadline yesterday. And today, a lot of teams across the NFL are finalizing their practice squads. And we're actually going to get into that today. And one of the reasons that I think it's so important, Morgan, for us to talk about the practice squad, and it goes back to something Dan Campbell said, I want to say it was last season, where when he talks about the practice squad, like these are not just like a group of guys that they're looking to develop, or they're not just bodies to throw at, the main guys so that they can get prepared. Like this Lions team looks at the practice squad as an extension of this roster. Everyone that is on that practice squad is expected to be, just as hardworking, just as dedicated to their craft, and be looking for opportunities to contribute to this team if they are so called upon.
Yeah, for sure. Because you think about it, I love the way that Dan Campbell thinks of it that way. And I'm sure Brad Holmes does too, because why not? I'm sure there's going to be through the years, there'll be developmental guys on the practice squad that they just want to see, like Brandon Joseph last year, carried it and look at him now. That's a prime example. So I love the way that they look at it this way, because football is a tough sport, man. And this season, it's probably going to get longer by the sound of it from the chatter we heard during the offseason about adding another game. So I love it. The next step is to expand active roster sizes, to be honest, by 4 or 5 spots if you're going to add another game, in my opinion. And then that just gives people even more of a chance to stick on an active roster. And yeah, I like it because someone who tweeted it was one of the POD staff said, tell me about how this practice squad could beat the 2008 Lions. And I was like, well, maybe.
All right. So before we get into it, we didn't break down the entire 53-man roster because it's 52, 53, players that to kind of go through. But I will go through this one really quickly, Morgan, just because it's only 15 guys that we're talking about. So these are the players that the Lions decided to retain on their practice squad. We had linebacker Mitchell Agude, center Kingsley Iguaquin, quarterback Jake Fromm, running back Jamar Jefferson, tackle Jamarco Jones, the ever-living wide receiver Tom Kennedy, tight end James Mitchell, safety CJ Moore, defensive lineman Pat O'Connor, a wide receiver Tim Patrick, who we discussed yesterday, defensive lineman Kyle Pecco, who we also discussed yesterday, wide receiver Allen Robinson, which is maybe a few years too late, but I still think that there's always the possibility that, he has accomplished so much in his career. So maybe the Lions can still, get a little bit out of Allen Robinson in a potential reserve role. You also have defensive lineman Chris Smith, defensive lineman Isaac Ukuwu, and then we have tight end Shane Zylstra. Morgan, looking at that list of those players, of these 15 players that are so far have been assigned to the practice squad, who stands out to you the most that you're most excited to have back with the Lions?
Man, I'm thrilled to have, you mentioned it before we got on, I'm thrilled that they, padded the receiver and tight end positions rather. You got James Mitchell and Shane Zylstra back, and I'm glad to be wrong, because I did not think James Mitchell or Zylstra, to be honest, was going to clear waivers. I thought some tight end needy team would grab them. They both have tape performing in the NFL. I think they both have some upside still. James Mitchell's only 25. Also, Tom Kennedy has only been in the league 3 years. Why do I feel
like he's been here forever, right? It's not just me.
That's funny. When I saw that, I was like, no way. But yeah, definitely tight end and receiver for me, just because we talked about it yesterday. They only carry in 4 receivers and 3 tight ends on the active roster. So this is going to make me feel a little more warm and fuzzy about the situation. What about you?
Yeah, I think, those 2 positions are definitely a bright spot on this practice squad. And I think those are the 2 positions that probably have the most chatter about this practice squad currently happening. I'm going to go to 2 players that you and I talked about in the preseason that I think are really good developmental pieces. And they definitely showed up in camp, and they definitely showed up in the preseason. And that's Mitchell Agude and then Isaac Ukuwu. These were 2 guys that when they were given the opportunity to perform on the field, we're doing it consistently. And for me personally, I was a big Isaac Ukuwu fan. Even before he even got into camp, I really liked what he did at Ole Miss, and I thought it would translate really well, and the Lions could get a lot out of him. So the fact that he's landing on the practice squad and now has an opportunity to develop and continue to grow with this team, he can be potentially one of those guys when you come back around to training camp next year that he can, hopefully find a stride that's similar to what Brandon Joseph was able to do, or some of these other veterans that, again, probably had to spend a couple years on the practice squad, but once they got their opportunity, could finally find a way onto the roster. And I think Ukwu and Agude both kind of have that play style to them, to where, again, maybe not during this season, but next season maybe have a better chance of fighting for a roster spot.
For sure, man. Like if you can give them a ton more reps at different positions along the defensive line, see if either of them can. Like I know we experimented it a bit, like with in preseason with them getting reps at the Sam, so that would be good to see if they can learn that a little bit more, because that's a unique skill set. I've seen some misconceptions about the Sam linebacker position, man, and I think a lot of people are confused as to what that is. It's still primarily a pass. Like you're going to rush the passer a lot, but you're going to have the ability to set an edge, to drop into coverage and like be in zone, maybe play a little man here and there, but like you're not just covering people. People are a little confused on that. But yeah, either of them, you want to keep that pipeline full. That's why I like this so much, because if you have a Brandon or Joseph or two, like a player like that on that trajectory every year, it's just going to go a long ways into making your roster, keeping your roster as deep as the Lions have it now, like just by keeping that pipeline full.
Right?
Yeah, exactly.
Well, because these are, when we're talking about Mitchell Agude and Isaac Ukwu, like these are UDFA. So they're not, there's not as much money that's dedicated to them. Now, eventually, obviously, if they start performing, you're going to have to pay them, but you're getting them relatively on the cheap as well.
Yeah, exactly. And it's cost controlled. And if there's a lot of untapped potential for guys like this, then that's what having an elite coaching staff, because the Lions do right now. I'm not being shy about any of this stuff anymore, man. They got voted by, I think it was Ben Solak of ESPN, the second best coaching staff in football. I can't argue that. The first was the Chiefs. Proofs in the pudding, but top to bottom, this is awesome. And yeah, I love it because it'll show, like if you have Brandon Josephs and Ukwus and stuff like that, players like that consistently improving year over year and making the active roster and making plays on Sundays, that just goes to show how good this coaching staff is.
For sure. The next thing I wanted to kind of get into, and you were kind of alluding it in your point when talking about Shane Zylstra and James Mitchell. Listen, we were both pretty sold on the fact that hey, these guys might not come back. Just because there's so much talent. And I think that was always the concern with this roster, even going into camp in the first place, is that there's a lot of talent here. And if certain guys don't make this Lions roster, there's a good chance that they kind of get picked up by other contending teams, or other teams that are probably, can give these other players actual playing time or less competition to get into a contributing role. But the fact that a James Mitchell and a Shane Zylstra can be cut, a Kyle Pecco can be, waived and still be willing to revert back to the practice squad. Morgan, to me, one, I think it communicates the culture here, right? And that's something that's been hyped up and propped up since Dan Campbell's been here. But I think it also illustrates just how little we know about the conversations that happen behind the scenes when it comes down to these tough decisions that these coaches have to make when they're letting players go. We on the outside, because again, we're guilty of it too, because we jump to that conclusion, but we assume that if a player's cut, that a team is just moving away from that player altogether. But it kind of goes to show that there is possibly conversations about hey, we would love to bring you back on the practice squad if there's not an opportunity that you're more passionate about, or whatever the case may be. And I think James Mitchell and Shane Zylstra and Kyle Pecco are prime examples of that.
Yeah, and I love that you brought that point up, because you see it a little bit in Hard Knocks, right? You see those conversations taking place between a coach and a player being let go. And a lot of them are hey, if you clear waivers, we would love to have you back here. They might lay out a path for the roster. There's a path for James Mitchell and Pecco to be active early in the season. They might just be this is speculation, but
yeah,
I feel like you could light a fire under a player like James Mitchell right now. Hey man, this, you got to earn it. And that very well could be what this is. Hopefully this lights James Mitchell up, and he's by week 6 or 7, he's tight end 2. That'd be great if he's blocking and he's in there. And, when the Lions have 2 tight ends on the field, that'd be awesome. So that's one thing I think about with Pecco. I really think his ability to be active on a Sunday, I think it's just going to depend on where DJ Reader is, right? Because I
Yeah,
think Pecco's a good nose tackle. He's been around. The tape is there. He can one gap. He can two gap. He's kind of an immovable force in there. That's what he does. But he's not DJ Reader, and respectfully, not
yeah.
many people are.
No, not at all. But I think to that point, right? Both of these players, like the players that we're talking about, the James Mitchell, the Kyle Peckos, I mean, you know, Tim Patrick, possibly even Allen Robinson, like these guys have chances to be elevated at any point in the season. But you were kind of explaining to me before we even got on here, like the Lions are still going to have to be strategic because of the rules that are in place when it comes down to elevating players from the practice squad, right?
Yeah, exactly. And I clarified this with Jeremy just to make sure. But so a standard elevation, like on it 3 times in a season, like the Lions could activate a Kyle Pecco or a James Mitchell or a Zylstra, just depending. I really do think the Lions approach this coaching staff, especially, I think most should, to be honest with you. They approach games on a week to week basis. Like, so they're not married to one way to do things. So I
Mm-hmm.
do think there's like a good path for players on the practice squad to play meaningful snaps during the regular season, just depending on the opponent and what they're trying to do, like from a schematic standpoint. So yeah, I do think there's a possibility for that to happen. And there's 3 elevations per player. So after that third elevation, they have to be added to the active roster or they're going to be subject to waivers. And then teams are allowed 2 elevations per week. Okay, so that's something to think, and that's factored into your 48 players that you can dress on game day. So
So yeah, those are things
well,
like it's going to be really important to see like how the Lions decide to use those elevations, whether it's for depth, whether it's for strategy, because you saw that last year, right? When they kind of started having some injuries and they kind of needed like, okay, we need an extra interior offensive lineman to back up, Graham or something like that. We're going to
yeah,
elevate somebody just in case. But like you said, they have to still be very strategic because after that third time, you either have to sign that player or they're again subject to waivers, and then you're gonna have to wait once again for them to clear waivers just to get them back on your practice squad. So it's a juggling act for sure. Um
yep. And I love that you made that point too, because they can't, like, after that third time, they have to clear waivers. They can't just go back to your practice squad. So if they clear waivers, they can go back if they so choose. But they're not just gonna. You can't just keep doing that that would be gaming it. So I do like. It's almost like, I'm sure Brad Holmes has a board up there, and this position's banged up this week, so we got to elevate this
mhm.
person. He's got 2 left. It's only week 11. It's like, you start to, and then this is where your player personnel department plays such a big role, because these guys, like these scouts, these pro scouts have Rolodexes. That's how these players
Yeah,
get calls. They get calls so fast. You know what I'm saying? Like, a receiver goes down and someone needs a receiver. That player's agent's getting a call quickly. You know what I mean? So I love it. It's just top to bottom, and they're really committed just to making this team as the best as possible, right? So we like that.
absolutely. All right, so the last thing we have to talk about before we get out of here, and like I said, it's probably the most talked about thing when it comes down to this practice squad, is the potential wide receiver battle that we're going to have on the practice squad, which is not something that you typically hear about in the NFL. But we talked about it yesterday. The Lions added Tim Patrick, who was a number 2 wide receiver for Denver when he was healthy. They added Allen Robinson today, and Allen Robinson has had a very good career, but the last few seasons, for whatever reason, just hasn't quite been the same for him. But he has all the physical tools that you would want out of a big body X receiver. And then it's at least being reported. The Lions haven't updated their practice squad just yet, but it's at least being reported that Donovan Peoples-Jones is expected to also be on this practice squad. So, Morgan, you have a 3-way battle for that X wide receiver position between DPJ, Allen Robinson, and Tim Patrick. First of all, what do you think about that as a concept? And then who do you kind of have probably coming out as the winner of this competition?
That's tough, to be honest with you. I think it's good. I love the competition because that's what this coaching staff has preached from jump, right? Like, we're going to compete, and then we're going to compete some more, and that's what
Mm-hmm.
it's about. So I hopefully this gets the best out of everybody, and the Lions actually have, like, okay, like now Patrick's playing well. Donovan Peoples-Jones has stepped back up. Allen Robinson's found some juice again. Detroit guy. My my memory of Allen Robinson, I was at the game. It was years ago. but he hit the blade dance. He scored. I think he was with the Jags, and he hit the blade dance, and I was like, oh,
He needs to be back in Detroit. Like, that was the only
yeah.
thought going through your head.
Yeah, I was like, that would be so nice because it was, yeah. I think he's with the Jags, something like that. But I think they ended up losing that game. But yeah, I think it's great. It's good competition. And if I had to pick, man, I don't know, maybe early on DPJ because he's at least familiar with the system.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Like, whereas Patrick's a vet. He's 30, like we talked about yesterday. So I'm sure he's going to put. And Allen Robinson's also a vet. So it'd be nice if Allen Robinson found some juice again, man, because he's one of my favorite non-Lions for a minute, and the Detroit ties help, obviously.
I was gonna say, like, the Detroit ties is the thing that I think a lot of people are gonna be rooting for when it comes to Allen Robinson. But I'm like you. I love the competition of this, and I love the fact that, again, it kind of paints the picture as to what Dan Campbell was talking about. And I know we've referenced it a few times in our videos when talking about the wide receiver position. But when Dan was talking about, like, hey, we're not gonna force ourselves to carry 5 wide receivers if we don't have to. This is why, because they, again, value their practice squad so much, and they're going to still allow there to be competition on this team, even on the practice squad. So you get, these 3 wide receivers who are going to battle it out. And for me, for my money, if I had to put money on it, I'm still going to probably lean towards Tim Patrick. I know he's on the older side. I know he's 30 and things of that nature, but it's already being talked about in Denver where, like, people were a little, like, bummed that he wasn't going to be back on the roster. And I think there's still that belief that he still has a lot to give to a team in terms of his talent and things like that. So yes, the injuries are scary, and yes, they are very big injuries that kept him out for 2 years. But we've talked about this before, even when DPJ was competing in camp. It's not like they're asking him to go out there and replicate what he was doing in 2021. It's not like he needs to come in here, catch 50 passes, and go for over 700 yards. If you can come in here and catch 30,
35.
40 passes, right?
Yep.
Rack up and just contribute maybe 300, 400 yards, like, you're doing what they're asking you to do. Because at the end of the day, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Sam Laporta, JMO, those guys are going to do the bulk of the heavy lifting. All you have to do is just be, again, where you're supposed to be because of the type of quarterback and type of system that the Lions run. You just need to be able to run crisp routes, get open when you're called to get open, be able to separate. And so if DPJ does actually end up on the practice squad, I agree with you. I think he has a leg up in terms of understanding the system and the playbook, but I still, like, have my doubts because it's like, if you weren't able to separate very well when you knew you were in a competition, then I don't know if there's all of a sudden going to be this light switch for him. And I think Tim Patrick is really going to probably be the front runner and apply a lot of pressure to those other 2 guys to really, find a way of getting on the active roster come Sunday.
Yeah, and I'm going to switch my answer now because I thought about something. Tim Patrick can block, so then he might be the winner by that metric. If you can give us a little bit of Josh Reynolds production, move the chains here and there, and block out on the edge, because we know Saint's going to block, we know Waymo's going to block. So yeah, that'd be nice. I think the Lions will roll with that because that's what they're looking for. They don't need, like we talked about, we're not looking for Calvin Johnson over there. The last 2 I'm happy about, just looking at it, is Kingsley Igwekukon.
Oh yeah,
just because that's like nice insurance, man. If Frank, hopefully not,
for sure,
real wood, but if he's banged up, like, and you want to keep Graham there and you want to just slide Kingsley in at center, I think you could do that. And then I'm happy Jamar Jefferson is back because Dan Campbell mentioned him, like, that time when he told Jeremy he's like really good. Remember that?
Yeah.
During the press conference. So, and that, like you said, extension of the roster. If the running backs get really dinged up, hope it doesn't happen. Knocking on wood again. Don't worry, guys. I'm on it. Then it's nice to have somebody who I think would do well behind the Lions' the best offensive line of football. So.
Yeah, especially even considering the fact that Vaki made the 53, he still is learning the position. So Jamar Jefferson is someone who's very familiar, not just with the Lions system, but with just playing running back more naturally. So again, whatever role they have for Vaki currently, maybe they don't have to put too much of a workload on him in the event that, like you said, too many injuries start to pile up at that position. So definitely, I think every Lions fan should feel really confident in this practice squad, which is a really weird thing to do. I don't know how many teams across the NFL are are pounding their chest about their practice squad. But the Lions, like we said at the beginning of this video, they view this group of players as an extension of the roster. Just because they have the title of practice squad doesn't mean that they're any less of a factor on this team. I believe it was like last year where it was kind of talked about, like they make a point to even have their practice squad guys at these games. Like it's not even just like, all right, cool, practice, throughout the week and then go home and watch us on TV. Like, no, we want you here. We want you a part of the team type of atmosphere. So really
I
excited
love
about this
that.
group.
Me too, man. And I love that. That's Dan Campbell being a saint that he is. You know what I mean? Because that's awesome. Like you put in a lot of work, and don't get me wrong, these guys in the P squad still make a real good living too. Don't feel bad for them.
Yeah.
They're not making NFL money, but they are doing real good. I promise you that. All these guys are happy to be getting that paycheck, and you're in a good spot like the Lions. Like there was that article, someone said Tim Patrick is going to chase rings, and I was like, I had to pinch myself. I was like, hold up, son.
Right. I saw that too, where it's like, I saw like the headline where it's like Tim Patrick goes to Super Bowl contender, and it's like, oh my God, like that's where we've climbed to. That's what we are now as the Detroit Lions.
I know, bro. I was like, good Lord, I had to pinch myself for sure.
But yeah, man. So that's pretty much going to do it for this video, guys. Let us know in the comment section below, like, what are your overall thoughts of the practice squad? Maybe this doesn't do much for you. Maybe you're not overly impressed. But again, what do you think of it? Are there any players on this practice squad that you're really excited to see how they translate and how they contribute to this team? Is there someone that you wish would have landed on the practice squad but didn't? And then again, what do you think of the combination of Tim Patrick, Allen Robinson, and DPJ potentially fighting it out for that wide receiver X position? Who do you think comes out on top? And just again, what is your overall thoughts of that camp battle or practice squad battle that's going to be taking place during the regular season? Like always, if you're looking for more Lions content or any more updates as the Lions continue to flesh out this roster, you can always check out prideofdetroit.com as new articles are being uploaded up over there every single day. And if you want to stay tuned to any of the video content, all you have to do is hit the subscribe button, hit that notification bell, and both of those things are going to help you see more of our video content, but also keep you notified every time we upload new content as well. So with all that said, I'm Miko. He's Morgan. Thank you guys for taking the time to watch, and we'll catch you guys in the next one.